Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there?
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM.
And here we are. It's conference championship week. We've made it. And you are with us on BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I am Chris Mack, and we've got you for almost the next entire hour. We've got you locked in to what to expect in these conference championship games, what it does to the playoff picture, and even the revolving coaching game of musical chairs that continues for those teams that have already seen their season come to an end, or maybe are just on the lookout with their bowl not yet announced. We've got all that in the offing, where teams are going, who they're going to play, all that after this week. But we've got to get into this week first and through it. First of all, thanks for pulling us up on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel, or however you get us, whether it's however you get your favorite podcasts, including your Odyssey app, AUDACY, or maybe you're just listening on the BetQL network. Thanks for joining us as we get ready to look at first the updated playoff rankings, boys. Georgia number 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3. Florida State re-enters the top 4, as those are our 4 undefeated teams. Oregon 5, Ohio State 6 after the loss to Michigan. Texas 7 still has hopes alive, just ahead of Alabama at 8, who they beat earlier this year. We can get into that conversation later, as well as all the other scenarios that could play out this weekend. But let's start with that re-entry that I mentioned at number 4. The Seminoles are back in that picture by virtue of the fact that they won a game with their backup quarterback, and they got a chance to win another one with their backup quarterback in the ACC championship game against Louisville this Saturday. Are they a lock, John, if they can beat Louisville this weekend to get in? Because there's no way we're keeping out an undefeated Power 5 champ, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I struggle with it, guys, because this is not almost certainly what they would have done had this been the starting quarterback the entire year. But we can't know that. That's not the way it played out. It's not the way it unfolded. And we cannot say that with any degree of, 100% certainty, because, anything could have happened. Who is truly to say? And also I would make the argument that there are, other phases, right? There's the defense that has earned it, right? There's the special teams that has earned it. It's not all about one position and one player. Now, if you want to ask me, and the criteria turns from who we really believe can win the championship, they are not in. They would not be in the 4. However, I don't think that is how this is ultimately going to be decided, who can. And really, is it the committee's job to determine who they think can and can't? They need to go by an objective sort of set of metrics, which is a 13 game sample size, and sort of let that, I think, speak. And I think based on what Florida State has done, if they win against Louisville and they win the ACC, there's really just, I just put myself in a Florida State fan's shoes, right? I would really be just beside myself, if apoplectic, if my team was left out undefeated, regardless of who the quarterback was. So yes, they win, they are in.
Yeah, Choppy, I can't imagine a world where they try to project what Florida State is just based on the backup quarterback being at play now. It's got to be the 4 teams that earned the shot, regardless of what condition they're in now.
Yeah, look, I don't know who this apoplectic guy is, but you're going to have to explain to me what that means. I get
Big words in RJ.
I get almost everything you're saying except for that. Here's my issue. They can't win. The dude threw for 130 yards against Florida. If you can't win, why am I putting you there? I don't know. Are they better today than they were 2 weeks ago? No, they're not. Like, right? Once they lose a quarterback, they're not. Are they better than Texas? Would they beat Texas head up? Would they beat Alabama head up? Would they beat Ohio State? Would they beat Oregon? I would say no. I get it. It's a Power 5, undefeated Power 5 team.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to have this is a different team today than it was 2 weeks ago. They can't judge them just off that. As of now, they're not an undefeated Power 5 team. When you don't have your starting quarterback, you're not the same team. So I get it. And I agree with you, John, that if you're a Florida State fan, how do you, whatever word you said, how do you handle this, right? You can't wake up the next morning and have any semblance of fairness in your life if your team goes undefeated and you're left out. But I'm sorry, man. Texas is better than you right now. Alabama's better. Ohio State, Oregon, they're all better. You're at best 8, at best.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if as currently constructed if they'd beat anybody in the top 10, but I don't know if that's not the criteria, right? The criteria.
How do you disregard 10 weeks of data? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do you just? I mean, I know you could say, well, it wasn't that quarterback, but it was that defense, it was that coaching staff. I mean, it was the skill position guys outside. So are we, and I get it, and I agree with you, RJ, and that's why I do struggle with it just on the face of it, because we all know this team is not going to beat. Let's just say if it's Georgia or if it's Michigan, right? They're going to get creamed as the 4th spot if they end up getting through. But to me, 10 weeks on both sides of the ball, undefeated Power 5 champ, and they still had to go out and win the ACC championship this week. I mean, I would probably have the lawsuit ready to go, antitrust. It's highway robbery if you're an undefeated Power 5 champ and you don't get in. The Brett McMurphy projected line, by the way, if it remained Georgia versus Florida State in what would in all likelihood be the Sugar Bowl in the CFP semifinals, Georgia would be favored by a full 2 touchdowns, by 14. So there you go.
14,
something to think about. By 14.
14, Brett, that would be that would be as bad as the TCU game. Okay, if it's 14, I am selling. I'm selling my house. I am putting the entire lot on Georgia minus the 14, and I'm going to rebuy it the next day. Like that, there's no way that's 14.
No, it's not going to be 14. It's going to be probably, I think, nothing
20
short
and a
of
half.
20. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's that. But again, to your point, John, this is you can't throw out the first 12 weeks of the season, the first 12 games of the season. So let's talk Michigan, Ohio State in retrospect now. I'm sure there's some convoluted scenarios. I read the whole Stuart Mandel piece earlier this week, the 16 different playoff scenarios that exist based on how, 4 of these conference championship games go. There is a path, I imagine, for Ohio State to somehow sneak back in, but I find it hard to believe that Ohio State has any, you almost, in a year like this one, where you've got 4 undefeated teams right now, you have to win your conference championship in order to get in, I think, unless you're Georgia. So let's talk about those two things. I guess primarily can Georgia remain in, Choppy? Or are they still in even if they lose to Bama?
Well, I said, last week that I think if Georgia loses, that it's not about Texas versus Alabama for that spot. I'm assuming Florida State would lose, but it would be between Georgia and Texas. I think Alabama wins, they're going to win. If they beat Georgia, they're going to be in, regardless of the head-to-head, because their win over Georgia trumps the head-to-head. Yep. They'd be the first team to beat Georgia 2 years or whatever. So, yeah, I think the avenue for Florida State to be an undefeated and be kept out might be Georgia losing. Because I don't.
And the other undefeated's holding. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the committee would take a one-loss. I'm sorry, I don't think the committee would take Florida State over a one-loss Georgia. I don't know how they would.
Ooh.
I mean, that. Well, right? I mean,
undefeated and conference champ. See, here's the thing that gets me about that, and I understand what you're saying. Georgia's clearly the better team. Like, I don't think there's any argument about it. But then it comes down to, are we trying to subjectively decide who the 4 best teams are, or are we taking the performance over the last 3 months and saying that performance, whether we think you're actually one of the 4 best teams or not, that performance earned you the right to prove that you belong there, which it would in Florida State's case, John?
I don't want my fate to be subjectively decided. That's what I don't want.
It's why we have a playoff. It's why we continue to expand the playoff.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, this needs to be a very defined, set of metrics. I know, like, it's like, well, isn't that the BCS? Wasn't that the BCS? Like, are we just going back to that? But in my view, it's not, Condoleezza Rice or whoever. Like, who are you to tell me what I can and can't achieve? You don't know that. Honestly, we should just let the odds makers determine that. If we're going to go that route, we should just completely let the betting markets and the places where they have millions of dollars of liability. We should just let. I trust their opinions a lot more than I trust the committees, for example, if we're going to go down that route. So that's what I would do. But yeah, I mean, if Florida State wins are in, RJ, I mean, you gotta just get real cozy with that, man. You got to accept that, because if it was Texas, in that scenario, how would you feel, right? How would Texas feel? How would Texas fans feel? Even if they lost Quinn Ewers and it was the backup,
Let's bring up the Texas-Bama argument then, because that's worth bringing up in this case. If we're down to a decision between those two, and they're both one-loss conference champs, and Bama may have the stronger resume, but Texas beat them head up. Granted, it was 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago, but Texas beat them straight up. How do you not take Texas? Otherwise, that game doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it matters. It matters, but it also matters how they're playing now. And then, again, I don't believe if Bama were to win, they'd be choosing between Bama and Texas. I think they'd be choosing between Georgia and Texas.
Yeah.
I think Bama's going to wind up being in either way if they win, because
Bama's in if they win. Yeah,
they're in because that head-to-head matters.
For example, I've even seen projected rankings where, like, to your point, RJ, like, they're not battling for in or out positioning necessarily, but maybe they're both in as one-loss conference champs. But Bama's ranked higher because, again, resume, and they just come off a win against Georgia and snapping the streak and all that. And Texas is coming off a win over Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy's mullet.
Right.
And again, for me, it comes back to, no, I saw Team A beat Team B on a field earlier this season. And so I put Team A ahead of Team B, even if it happened all the way back in early September.
Yeah, I do think you have to leave a little bit of room, though, for the difference in Alabama, right? I mean, that was sort of at a time when, I mean, if we're gonna really, like, if we're just gonna get subjective with this, right? You have to think about how different their offense is. I mean, Milroe was getting benched, and then he was not benched, and then he, I mean, you can't even compare the Jalen Milroe of today to the Jalen Milroe of September. No. So do we think Texas would do that in Tuscaloosa today? I mean, they could. I mean, they're a really good team, but I don't think I'd bet on it. I don't think I would bet on Texas today if that game were November as opposed to September. It's a very different Crimson Tide.
But yeah, it comes back again, Choppy, to most deserving or who's best. Like, you can tell me Alabama's a better team than Texas right now, and I agree with you. Yeah. Alabama's a better team than Texas right now, but again, otherwise, that game 3 months ago when they played head up, to your point, it still means something, but it doesn't mean nearly as much as a head up game. We're getting back to subjectivity rather than objectivity.
Yeah, but I mean, then again, like, do we overrate head to head? Styles kind of make fights. There, you could beat the team you're playing and be a worse overall team. I mean, it's just based on style, really. I mean, you could just not match. It's a bad matchup. I mean, there's plenty of examples of that throughout history of teams that are better losing basically based on style. I think that clearly could have happened in that situation. I don't know that it did. I think the fact is that Texas was more advanced at the time than Alabama was, especially at the quarterback position. And now Milroe is much different. Jalen Milroe doesn't make that throw against Auburn in week 2. But he made it
Nope.
this past weekend. So I hear what you're saying. And you have to have head-to-head matter. It has to matter. But I also think how you're playing now has to matter as well. And you also got to look at the overall resume. It shouldn't just be, well, they get the same record, they're both conference champs, and they won the head-to-head. Well, no, that team beat Georgia. And then the other team
exactly.
lost
We're exactly right. I was going to say you were stipulating a win against Georgia and Atlanta in the SEC championship game, a team that hasn't lost in 2 years. And I would say that win certainly should overcompensate for that loss in September.
Loss. Yeah.
Right. The value to me, I would have more value on that win for Bama than that loss for Bama back in September.
Right.
Let's get into these games individually. Let's talk Pac-12, SEC, ACC title games. We'll even dive into the Big 12 and Big 10 games as well. And who's going to be the Group of 5 representative? We know John wants to talk about that, Mr. AAC. Probably still a little heartbroken about Memphis not being in the conversation anymore. But we'll get into all of it as we continue here on Conference Championship Weekend alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack, and this is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And welcome back in as we continue to roll into the conference championship games here on BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. We appreciate you joining us, however you're doing it. Total and full disclosure, you know this. We do the show before Friday night, Saturday morning, when you may be listening to it. So sometimes we're going to preview a Friday night game. It's happened a couple times this week, and certainly not going to stop us this week from talking about the Pac-12 title game. So, again, entirely likely if you're listening to this on Saturday morning or late Friday night, you already know what happened. But we here at this point on the alternate Back to the Future timeline do not know what to expect. And in some cases, I don't really understand why we've got the line that we do on the final Pac-12 championship game. Oregon, Washington, Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Washington getting 9.5. Total sits at 65.5, 66. If you're really all about Washington, man, those money lines are enticing, anywhere from the 275 range all the way up over 3-1. This line, I think, surprised all three of us. We talked about that during the break, guys. But there's a lot going on here. You've got Oregon losing the first matchup between these two, maybe just based on coaching decisions and coaching decisions alone. Dan Lanning took a lot of heat after the first meeting between these two teams. You got the Heisman Trophy possibly being decided in this game. And again, as I mentioned, Choppy, this is the last Pac-12 championship game as well before the conference gets blown to smithereens. So what's your read on this one? And does that 9.5, does that make any sense? Are we all getting suckered here?
So I talked to a buddy of mine who's a handicapper, and he said that he had it at 8.5 himself. He says Washington's just played so poorly lately that, you can – but he would never take it beyond 9. Like, he wouldn't take that game beyond 9. And I tend to agree with him on that. It's a high number. That's a real high number. Because these are like – Washington is supposed to be one of the 4 best teams in the nation. And they're a 9-point dog, 9.5-point dog in their own conference championship game to a team they already beat. Yeah, there's some odd things there. This is some bulletin board material maybe that they're going to use, but it's a high point total. But I'll say this: Washington's been they have not been great. I really respected the Oregon State win for how they had to do it in the weather.
Right. Yeah.
But let's be fair. Like they have played really since the Oregon game, and maybe since the USC game, kind of lackluster.
Yeah, I mean, it's been weird to watch them struggle at times, but still continue to churn forward, climb into the top 4, all this stuff that, comes with being 13-0 and winning games however you have to win them. They've done that. And to RJ's point, the Oregon State game a couple of weeks ago, say what you will about Washington State, that's a rivalry game. Again, I think there was that added twist of, hey, it's the last time we're going to see each other for a long time in a rivalry game, in-state rivalry game. There's a lot of reasons I don't know, maybe I'm just making excuses for the way Washington has played the last month or so.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question that this is a massive, massive swing because you're talking about a game that closed 3 in Washington. Obviously, Washington favored. So you're getting a 12.5-point swing, and this is not going to, Eugene. This is going to Vegas. What would this number be in Eugene? I mean, are we talking about a 2-touchdown number here? I mean, have they been playing that bad? I mean, I don't think they've been playing that bad. But I always sort of harken back to, like, sports books are not charities, man. I mean, they're not dangling free money. This is not a free money glitch. I mean, this is obviously power ratings. This is obviously sharp money driving this up from 7.5. Some spots, guys, this is 10. I did see historically there have only been 2 undefeated top 5 teams that were getting more than a touchdown in a conference championship game in the last 18 years. And both of those teams on the wrong side of that spread, the underdogs, did not cover. They did not win, and they did not cover. If I was playing this game, as crazy as it is, and I have not yet, it would be Oregon or nothing for me. Because again, I am a real believer and a real sort of absolutist in power ratings, and what the books are telling you is that all of their metrics have Oregon this much better than Washington.
Here's the other thing we got to talk about in this one. I mentioned the Heisman race. Jaden Daniels was the favorite 2 weeks ago, and now has fallen back behind Bo Nix, who has moved back into the favorite spot atop the Heisman race because, well, he gets to play this week, and Jaden Daniels is not going to play this week. I imagine an otherworldly game from Michael Penix Jr. may be enough for him to catch Bo Nix in this one. But I said it a week ago, Bo Nix has been putting up video game numbers for about a month now. And again, he gets a chance to shine in the national spotlight. Standalone game on a Friday night, not just on Saturday, towards the end of it after we've seen a bunch of college football. This will be the first big one of the weekend. Is it foolish to go anywhere else with your Heisman money at this point, Choppy, than Bo Nix?
I mean, not if he loses. Daniels doesn't have another game, so he's in the clubhouse, right? He's the leader in the clubhouse, if you will, because he doesn't have any games. His number is what it is. If Bo goes out there and lays a stinker, sure. I mean, I think you could put your money elsewhere. You better make your bet before the game hits though, because if they win. He's pretty much locked that thing up. But I think I would agree with that, that he would lock it up. But, I think, and I think Penix has obviously an outside chance if he wins again and has a great performance. But, I think that it would be Penix's to lose.
John, I was going to say, John, is there any chance Penix steals this one? I think the last I checked, he was 10-1 or in that neighborhood. A pretty decided long shot as compared to Daniels and Nix as the favorite right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people probably just have their minds made up at this point, at this late in the season. I mean, Jaden Daniels certainly, I think, had the most compelling case, but as you guys have discussed, he's done. His efforts in. He's turned his test in, and unfortunately, he's going to have 60 minutes fewer than Bo Nix, for example. So, I mean, I guess if Michael Penix comes out and throws for 500 yards and leads his team to an upset win, I mean, I guess that could flip it, but it feels like it would take – like he couldn't just have a good game, and win.
Yeah,
I think
he'd have to have the best game of the season. Yeah.
Absolutely. Which, I mean, look – he's had amazing games. He's had those kind of Madden number type games. He'd have to do that again, and he'd have to win. It can't be like a pick six at the end of the game by the Huskies. Like, it's got to be him leading the drive, him scoring the touchdown. I mean, it's got to be all that. So it's for me, it's definitely Bo Nix or nothing.
Yeah, and again, Nix has had those Madden numbers for about 4 weeks straight now. Let's go to the SEC title game. Saturday afternoon, 4 Eastern kick. Georgia, Bama. As we talked about earlier, Georgia can still get in with a loss, but it probably requires a Florida State loss as well, if not something else falling in their favor along the way this weekend. Bama, win and in is pretty much cut and dried. I can't see anything else happening. This is everything the SEC has come to be about, John, over the last decade. Georgia, Bama, a shot at the playoff on the line.
Yeah, I am so excited about this game. My kid somehow has a dance recital that lasts for 2 hours from 2 to 4 Central Time.
Oh, no.
She's 2 years old. I think this is actually illegal, and I'm going to be reporting this to the authorities because I don't think you can have 2-year-olds working that hard for that long. So I will definitely be finding a way out of that one. But no, look, I bet this. I've bet Alabama +6. I just think this is way too many points for a Georgia team that, look, give them credit. They're undefeated once again. But the closest thing they have seen to Alabama is Missouri in Athens, and Brady Cook is nowhere close to Jalen Milroe in terms of his sheer speed and athleticism. And that was a close game, and that was a game that Missouri covered. It was a 12-point spread. They lost the game by 9. They covered. I think Milroe is just a totally different animal than the first month of the season versus anything. I mean, Georgia's schedule is pretty weak, man. I mean, it just is. They have not played many great teams. I mean, Missouri's a top 10 team, and it was a scare. They messed around with Georgia Tech last week. Like, I just think Milroe is and this Alabama team are going to be in a position to win this game. I make it 3. I make it Georgia 3. And so for me, I'm showing a lot of value on Alabama +6. And I bet that probably 2 days ago. I don't know where it is now. I think it's still out there, maybe some places, but I do have Bama +6, and I would not be shocked if they pull this off outright.
Yeah, 5.5 some places. I've seen 6 still out there. I've even seen 6.5 still out there in some spots. Yeah. So there's a lot of play in this one, Choppy, because I think it's just what I said. It's Georgia, it's Bama, even though Georgia has been as dominant as they have been for 2 years, if there is a team to knock them off that pedestal at just the right time, it is Nick Saban with Jalen Milroe figuring it out over the last 4 weeks or so, and this team hitting its stride at just the right time.
Yeah, NFL scouts will tell you that this Bama team isn't as like nasty as other Bama teams have been. They're not as deep, for one, because of the transfer portal, but they're a little bit younger in certain spots. I was surprised the number got to 6. Got to 6.5 at some spots. I don't hate it. The Auburn game really kind of throws a wrench into me. For like that Auburn got worked by New Mexico State.
Yeah.
Are we really gonna just give this up to it's a rivalry game? It was a look ahead game. I mean, you've really got to convince yourselves of those things, in my opinion. I agree. I think it's a big number, especially if Milroe has a game. But dude, Georgia's kind of played. They've been daddy's home for a couple of weeks now. They've been wrecking shop, and I think they're going to give them more of a benefit of the doubt than I would Bama for a lackluster game against Georgia Tech. Just because, Bama in the beginning of the year, we saw Bama struggle with USF this year, and obviously they got beat by Texas at home. So it's not the greatest Bama team by any stretch.
Let's go to the ACC real quick. We touched on Florida State earlier. When they're in, it's hard. You can't keep an undefeated Power 5 champ out of the top 4 and out of the CFP. But lose, they're done. It's that simple for Florida State. And they're going up against the Louisville team that's coming off what I would think is a pretty demoralizing loss to Kentucky. Louisville still had kind of an outsider's puncher's chance at maybe creating some playoff noise had they beaten Kentucky and come into this one with a chance to upset Florida State. It's 2.5. Last I checked, Florida State by 2.5 in this one. It's lost some of its luster because of the Louisville losing to Kentucky factor, John, but again, it's Florida State with a chance to, I guess, all of a sudden, I don't know if I want to say they're playing Cinderella because they've got their backup quarterback in there, but they have a chance to really, as Choppy kind of laid it out earlier, upset a lot of people because they won't be one of the 4 best teams anymore, but they will be one of the 4 teams who has earned it.
Yeah, I think Louisville's going to win. I think they're going to actually make this really simple for everybody. Yeah, I like this Louisville team. And I do tend to disregard rivalry game results, like unless it's Michigan, Ohio State. I put a lot of, because that's the game that everybody with those two teams. I mean, the fact that Ryan Day is still there after losing 3 straight is kind of mind-boggling. But as far as Kentucky, Louisville, I mean, Louisville was dominating most of that game, and I don't know what exactly happened, but they somehow lost. That being said, I've watched a lot of Louisville this year. I love what they do offensively, and I think it's a lot to ask when you're dealing with the team in Florida State that you lose your quarterback. Okay, you take a breath. And now you're in an ACC championship game against an actually really good team that is going to be hungry, especially off that loss. So I actually think Louisville makes it really simple for everybody involved, streamlines this whole damn thing, and they get the job done. Pull the upset. There's a reason why I won't go to 3. It's not going to 3.5, right? It's getting stuck at 2.5. I like Louisville in this one to pull it off.
Choppy, streamlined ACC championship game. Does that make sense to you too?
Man, I'll tell you, again, Louisville, just like the Bama game, it screwed me up last week with that game against Kentucky. It really did. I mean, they have no business. Kentucky's not very good. They got 5 conference losses, and then they wound up getting beat. They gave up almost 40 points to a team that couldn't even score 14 against South Carolina. It threw me for a loop. But then again, like Florida State, like I don't buy I don't think they're the fourth best team in the country. In fact, I know they're not. They're probably with Tate, probably not a top 10 team in the nation, or just on the fringe. They're a lot more like Missouri, like in that regard than they are Florida State. So yeah, I would probably lean Louisville on this one. I don't have this game, I'm not going to play it, but I would probably lean Louisville.
We'll touch real quick on the Big 12 title game. And is there any reason to look at the Big 10 championship game as well? Michigan, a huge favorite over Iowa, plus the group of 5, because we have to talk about it or else John will get upset. And
Thank you.
maybe you're welcome.
Power
maybe
six.
Liberty,
Power
6. Maybe Liberty sneaking into a New Year's 6. Would that really just crush the AAC's dreams? And real quick look at the coaching carousel as well. Plus our best bets all on the way next here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack, and this is BetQLU for Conference Championship Weekend in college football. We broke down the two big ones, Pac-12 and SEC, and also talked briefly about the ACC title game and what we expect to happen between Louisville and Florida State with their backup quarterback now at the helm. Let's touch briefly on, we can kind of take these as a pair, guys. The Big 12 title game, Saturday, noon Eastern, 12 Central in Dallas, Oklahoma State against the Longhorns. And we've got the Big 10 title game, Saturday night in Indianapolis, Michigan. Everybody assumes it's a formality. 23.5-point favorites against number 16 Iowa. Michigan, Iowa kind of stands out to me. I don't know what you guys think. Not for upset potential. I don't think Iowa beats Michigan, but Michigan 2-4-1 against the spread when they've laid big spreads this year, 23.5 or more. Choppy, which one of these two games, if either, has your attention, given that we're not sure what Texas's future is, how much help they may need to get in, and it feels like a foregone conclusion that everyone expects Michigan to win?
You know, I don't know that I would take the Michigan spread. I think I would probably take the over in the game. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I would take the under in the game in the Michigan one if I was to bet on that one. I think that Texas and Oklahoma State, I got to give credit. You know, Gundy's done a really nice job. They were supposed to be the worst team in the conference this year at Oklahoma State, like one of the worst teams in the conference. And here he is. He's got them in the conference championship game. I think the Texas number is a much better number to go after, even if they don't, even if they know their fate by the time it happens. I don't think it matters. I think that's the much better game to go for.
John, which one of these two, if either? I mean, that's a low number. What Choppy's talking about there on the Big Ten championship game, 35.5 for a total. But I mean, Iowa being what Iowa is, wouldn't be surprising to see Michigan win that one 30-3 and still come in under the total.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I would have to play it, man. I've seen some pretty ridiculous derivatives out there, though, like that Iowa minus 0.5 in terms of first half points is like even money. I mean, it's just ridiculous, man. It's hard to imagine this team crossing midfield much, let alone scoring touchdowns. So, I mean, I think you're going to be fine at Michigan minus 23. I understand why sharp money has driven this down from 24 to 23, because it's like I don't know. I went to public schools, guys. So is that like 70% of the total, 75% of the total? So I understand why, but I would definitely take the under, and I would feel very comfortable with it.
Yeah. I'm not. RJ's not good with words. We're not good with math. But yeah, that's most of the points expected to be generated.
We're really good. We're crossing all the T's, right? I mean, we're nailing it on the show. Nobody's good with numbers or words. So perfect.
No, that's why we're in radio. Real quick, I want to touch on this since we have a group of 5 expert amongst us in John Martin. AAC title game. Your Memphis Tigers lost to SMU. SMU's rolling a bit. Going into New Orleans against number 22 Tulane. Tulane only favored by 4 in this one. If Tulane wins, they're the group of 5 representative in the New Year's 6. If Tulane doesn't win, the committee's going to have to choose between a 2-loss SMU team or most likely an undefeated Liberty team out of Conference USA. John, how close are we to seeing like a Liberty Penn State Peach Bowl matchup, which I know everybody's just absolutely riveted to their screens for?
Well, first of all, okay, we don't need your condescending Power 6 remarks. All right, we play big time brands of football in the AAC. Right. We don't claim the rest of the the dregs. All right, AAC's different. Tulane's not losing this game. SMU lost their quarterback stupidly. Preston Stone, Rhett Lashley kept the quarterback in there. He got hurt last game. He's out. Tulane's going to win. So it'd be Tulane, Penn State. And I would watch my ass if I was you, pal. You know what the Green Wave can do in these spots.
Woo! Bring it, AAC. Bring it.
Wow. Oh,
Hey,
man.
hey, watch Cotton Bowl highlights. Watch the Cotton Bowl highlights from a year ago. You guys know the deal. Tulane coming.
This ain't USC. Don't worry. There's an actual defense at Penn State.
That's true. That's a good point.
Choppy, that would be something though. Get like Liberty in a New Year's Six game. I'm kind of pulling for that just to see it happen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love those. The Western Michigans getting into the game or Tulane. Yeah, I like that. As long as the problem is when that happens.
Western Michigan with Tulane. Okay, that's ridiculous. Personal foul, unnecessary roughness on RJ.
Wait,
Western
Toledo versus Tulane this year, right now. Who wins? I can't believe we've gone this far.
Tulane by a billion.
Toledo this far from being undefeated.
Come on, you guys are coming at me with Mack.
Fighting Bruce Gradkowski, my friend.
Dude, I'll tell you this, man. Tulane, Western Michigan should have been in the Final Four that year. They would have wiped the floor with Tulane. They would have rowed the boat. They would have rowed that boat all over Tulane. PJ Flex style, baby.
Yeah.
15 years ago. But not this Tulane. This is a different animal.
Speaking of coaches who departed places and left them in the dust, some moves made over the last week or so. Mike Elko goes to Texas A&M. They do a very uncomfortable looking Aggie thing where everybody rocks and sways with each other because it's the Aggies and they got to have weird cheers. Jonathan Smith leaves his alma mater, Oregon State, to go to Michigan State. We got Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State. We got Fran Brown to Syracuse, back to the Northeast. And this is the coup de grace, the cherry on the sundae of the first week of the coach hiring cycle. Bobby Petrino back to Arkansas as the OC, Choppy.
Man, that's great, man. He's gonna hopefully he gets on his hog and rolls into town. That would be the best thing if he rolls into town for his press conference on a Harley. Oh, that would be just absolutely
with a neck
amazing.
collar on.
Yep,
just walks right up to the podium like this.
Yep, just gotta do it, man. I was surprised that the Oregon State coach left for Michigan State. Only that Michigan State it's such a tough job, and I get it. They don't really have a conference anymore. But I actually think Oregon State is just as good or a better job than Michigan State. Michigan State's brutal, man. You're competing for the same kids, Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think I'll be honest. I think I'd rather be Oregon State in the Mountain West than I'd rather be Michigan State in an 18-team big divisionless Big Ten, where you're automatically a part of like a maybe the second tier in a good year. Like you're right. Like that's a much more attractive spot. This is what happens when Power 5 schools just decide to throw money at things. As is the case at Michigan State, where they've had to throw lots of money at things. No surprise, Indiana let go Tom Allen, Dana Holgerson out at Houston as well. And, I did think this was interesting. A&M fans, I mentioned them earlier and how strange they can be. Gig 'em. Basically bullying the university and the athletic department out of hiring Stoops. John, that seemed very Aggie-ish. For lack of a better way to put it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It reminds me of when Tennessee fans bullied their athletic department out of hiring Schiano. It was very similar to that. And I think in both cases, they were right to do so. I mean, I think we sort of know what Mark Stoops is. We already see him in the SEC, right? I mean, it's okay. It's fine. It's decent. I don't know if you're going to be getting a whole lot better than what you were getting with Jimbo. At least with Mike Elko, I always sort of extrapolate. Back in the day, Justin Fuente came into Memphis, and he had turned what was a graveyard of a job into a conference champion by the time he was done with it. And it didn't work out for him at Virginia Tech honestly, because Virginia Tech didn't want it to work out. But he was an objectively really freaking good football coach. And if you can get Duke to respectability long-term and some of the things they were doing before Riley Leonard got hurt, I mean, beating Clemson there in the first game of the season, Clemson actually turned out to be pretty damn good. So I think when you can do something like that, at a place like Duke where the resources just aren't there, you're going to be able to go to Texas A&M, fit right in, and make some noise. Whatever that looks like, I don't know, but I do think Mike Elko will be heard from.
And for what it's worth,
I think it's a good.
Go ahead, RJ.
I think it's a good hire. I mean, I would have liked Jeff Traylor down at UT San Antonio for the job. He's a Texas guy. I thought he would have been a great fit for that job. Maybe he said no. I have a big problem with A&M going after Mark Stoops, not because of the Stoops, but man, you don't poach somebody in conference. That's old school SEC. This is why A&M didn't belong, right?
Is.
Old school. This is old school SEC, man. You do not poach another team's in your conference's coach. But A&M doesn't know that because they're not old guard. All right, they weren't in Knoxville in 1923 when the treaty was signed or whatever it is. I have no idea when it was, but I'm just going to guess it was could have been 1933. I don't know.
That's some old school Southwest Conference type stuff right there. That's what I want to bring back. Bring back the Southwest Conference. No coincidence, by the way. Mike Elko out the door. Riley Leonard immediately hits the transfer portal, too. Real quick, let's get to our best bets before we wrap things up. Records so far to this point in the season, RJ 5-6-2. Once again, just one leg away from hitting one of his big pizza money parlays last week. An Ohio State victory screws over RJ's 23-1 pizza money parlay. Or an Ohio State loss, I should say. He had Ohio State winning. John, 6-5-1 on best bets this year. I'm 8-6-1 after I completely blew it last week. I had Bama and Auburn parlayed to both cover. Good job by me. John, I'll let you start us. What do you got for a best bet this week?
Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer. Give them hell. Alabama. Absolutely. Wow. Yes. We got Alabama +6. I just feel like Milroe is he's elevated. He's playing with confidence. You don't make that throw, right, unless you are. So I like Alabama +6. Keep this very close. Again, give him a chance to win outright. I think 6 is too many on a neutral, right? I mean, even distribution there of tickets in that game because it's a title game. So give me Alabama just inside a touchdown.
180 on the money line, by the way, Bama as well. Choppy, what do you got for a best bet?
You know what? I'm gonna go App State Troy over 52.5. Give me the over 52.5 App State Troy. I also like UNLV plus the 2.5 too.
I like UNLV a lot. I like the Sun Belt scoring points. And you know what? I'm going to go all in on making Aggie fans mad. Give me Texas to cover the 15, a big number in the Big 12 championship game. But Sark wants to leave the Big 12 in the dust. Saw and heard him talking earlier this week about wanting to walk out of there with the banner to take with him on the way to the SEC. So give me the Horns to cover the 15 against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. We will be back next week on another edition of BetQLU. We will break down the CFP selections and maybe take an early peek at the bowl lineup as well. We'll have Heisman to talk. We'll have Army-Navy to talk, and maybe start to lean in on some hoops as well as we're starting to get closer and closer to the conference slate hitting in college hoops as well. Thank you again for listening live on the BetQL Network, for watching the show on the Odyssey Sports channel on YouTube, and for pulling us up inside your Odyssey app. Take us with you wherever you're going. AUDACY. It's free. Download it today. For our producer, Zach, for our new video guy, Dan, who managed to hang in there this week, even during some of the things that John said in the pre-show meeting. For RJ Choppy and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.